It's my distinct pleasure today to have Amy Castator with us. And Amy's the specialist here at WWF-Canada for Living Planet at Work. And we've had some fantastic conversations. Every time I learn so much. It is an exceptional program, Amy. I really have to give kudos. You can see the thought and the strategy put behind it. I confess that as I learn more, I start to appreciate how good the program really is. So without further ado, I am going to hand this over to you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. And yeah, welcome. I'm excited to share the Living Planet at Work program with you, as well as give you some action ideas that you can do to bring sustainability into your workplace. One of the things I wanted to do first, though, was share a few of the reasons why taking action for nature is so important right now. So our planet is facing two pretty unprecedented conservation crises today. First, we have climate change, which is accelerating sea ice loss, it's worsening wildfires, floods, drought, heat waves, and sea level rise. It's decreasing the flow of rivers, eliminating streams altogether even, increasing ocean acidification, which threatens marine life. And in Canada, the country is warming at twice the global average, and the Arctic actually at 3 times. So climate change is not a far off problem, and it's actually here now, and its consequences are being felt by wildlife and by people all around the world. And so the other crisis that's very connected to climate change is one of biodiversity loss. And globally, wildlife are declining at unprecedented rates, and that's true here in Canada as well. And that can be evidenced by our Living Planet Report Canada, which actually just came out last month. And it reveals that since 1970, populations of Canadian species that were assessed as at risk have declined by an average of 59%. And species assessed as globally at risk have seen their Canadian populations fall by an average of 42%. And so, as I mentioned before, these two crises are very closely interconnected. So, on one hand, you have climate change, which is a significant threat to and also accelerates biodiversity loss. But conversely, the destruction of nature is actually also an accelerator to climate change. And nature has been actually called the sleeping giant of the climate crisis because globally, as much as 30% of greenhouse gas emissions come from its destruction. And that includes things like the destruction of trees, plants, soils, coastlines, bogs, and all of these naturally store carbon. So when we destroy nature, it actually releases that carbon that these trees, plants, and bogs, soils were storing. And so that's how it further contributes to climate change. So the at-risk species that we assessed in the Living Planet Report Canada, they face a number of threats. And again, many of them relate to humans. And so they include things like overexploitation, like unsustainable fishing or logging and wood harvesting, things like invasion and disease of problematic species and invasive species or genes and diseases, pollution. And that's the introduction of materials or energy from both kind of local and kind of more non-localized sources. And that's including things like wastewater, industrial effluents, garbage, solid waste, also airborne pollutants. And transportation as well. And that's not just including the vehicles, it's also including the roads and railroads, utility and service lines as well. And urban development, of course, human settlements, housing, offices, schools, factories, commercial centers, even tourism and recreation. And of course, climate change. And so that's linked to the Earth's warming, but also some of the other severe climatic events like droughts and floods like that I mentioned earlier. And so our report states that these at-risk species actually face an average of 5 of these threats. And so we're learning that it's not just enough to tackle each threat independently or even each kind of species individually in terms of conservation. We need to be able to find conservation strategies that embrace that systematic and more kind of multifaceted approach that will tackle these multiple crises at the same time. And so one of the things I wanted to share as well is that in Canada, we are in a very unique position. And this map shows that we are one of the few countries that actually still has a lot of intact and relatively undisturbed ecological areas, which you can see in the green there. And so this gives us an opportunity, and I would even say a responsibility, to ensure that these areas remain intact. And so that's going to mean things like prioritizing areas for protection so that these areas remain undisturbed. But that's not the whole picture as well. We also need to restore habitats that have already been degraded. And we need to be able to practice stewardship or sustainable management of nature in these areas that are going to yield the greatest benefits for both climate change and biodiversity. And so that's what WWF Canada is focusing on in the next decade. And to put it in another way, what we're doing is we're putting a strong focus on nature-based solutions. So like I mentioned before, 1/3 of all climate change causing greenhouse gas emissions have resulted from the destruction of trees, ground cover, peatlands, and other kind of plants and ecosystems. And as these ecosystems are destroyed, they release that carbon that they were storing into the atmosphere. So nature-based solutions actually, through protection and restoration, as well as stewardship, it can stop the release of carbon, and it can provide habitat for wildlife, which address both that climate change and biodiversity crises at the same time. So one of the things I wanted to do now was narrow the focus a little bit just to the state of our watersheds in Canada. And that's because in Canada, we have 20% of the world's freshwater. So we know that, 1/5 of the world's freshwater is a lot. And we know that on a global scale, freshwater biodiversity is declining a lot faster than that in our oceans and forests. And so on average, globally, population sizes of freshwater species have declined by 84% since 1970. And so in Canada, we have to do what we can to keep these ecosystems healthy. And so what we did in 2017 was set out to complete a Canada-wide assessment of the health of and the threats to Canada's watersheds. And this slide here shows the results of that study. So let me start with the threats first. We looked at and evaluated a number of different threat indicators to watersheds, including things like pollution and habitat loss, which is the conversion of ecosystems into built environments. We looked at habitat fragmentation, which is the loss of connections between freshwater habitats from things like roads, railways, dams, that type of thing, across rivers. Overuse of water, invasive species, climate change, as well as the alteration of flows. And basically that means changes in the natural flow of a river because of large human-made structures like dams. And so through these indicators, we looked at, what is the overall threat to each of these watersheds? And you can see, just of note, that some of the biggest cities across the country, which kind of those southern regions there, they're facing threats that are very high or moderate overall. And so if you are interested in looking up kind of what the state of your watershed is, including some of the specific threats that it faces, you can go to watershedreports.wwf.ca. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the health portion now. And so for this, we used 4 indicators. One, water quality, and that's the volume of water in a river and how it kind of changes throughout the year. We also looked at the hydrology, which is the levels of chemical substances in the river, fish populations, as well as benthic invertebrates. And those are the bugs that live at the bottom of the river, which they do reveal a lot about the health of freshwater systems. And so you'll see that a lot of these watersheds are grayed out. And that's because there wasn't enough data, or at least it was inaccessible to us to be able to make a relatively accurate assessment of the health of our watersheds. And we noted that this data inaccessibility is a large gap. So that's what over the last few years we've been pushing for, things like standardized monitoring or elevating community-based water monitoring programs. And I just wanted to also flag that recently we will be about to release watershed reports coming October 20th. So you'll be able to see what the updated results of this looks like very soon. And then with the snapshots, with these kind of snapshots in time, we're going to continue to relay this information to local water decision makers, local communities, also, any person or group that will able to use the information to help take action to support biodiversity. But of course, climate change, biodiversity loss are big, hairy, complex problems that not one person or not one organization can solve alone. So what are some of the things that business can do or that you can do to help prevent some of the worst of these impacts from climate change and biodiversity loss happening? And if anyone has seen the film Our Planet, Our Business, which is based on the Netflix and Silverback films, and sorry if you hear the sirens in the background, the joys of working from home. The film called Our Planet, it actually gives a really great summary of the 5 universal goals that business should strive for. And one of the quotes from the film by Cristina Figueres, who's the former UNFCCC executive secretary, says, "While our past has been written, our future is yet to be determined and is in our hands." And so the film highlights that we have to make sure that everything we can do forever. And they've outlined 5 universal goals that business or that even you as an individual can think about taking. And the first one is, zero carbon. And so business needs to transition from fossil fuels and embrace clean technologies. Second is minimizing the space we use. We need to reduce the impact that we have on land. And just, one example could be, logging selectively. And this could be also where, protected areas come into play. And also, business can invent brand new sectors and they can come up with really cool and innovative solutions that can help to minimize the space that we use. We also have to return the oceans to good health. And, business really should only be taking what it can naturally replace. And so choosing sustainably sourced seafood could be a good example of that. And then eliminating waste. So we need to be practicing principles of something called a circular economy, where processes and designs allow for one organization's waste to be used as a resource for another organization, and kind of help create that continuous loop where nothing will get wasted. And another quote from the film that resonates with me is, there is no such thing as waste. Waste is just a resource in the wrong place. And that's true. But we need to be able to create these processes and these structures that allow for those more circular designs to become the norm. And then lastly, reimagining success. So growth for growth's sake is going to have to lose its attraction. And so we have to be reinventing that model of business to kind of mimic nature so that, you know, it can thrive along with a thriving planet. And one of my colleagues shared his main takeaway of the film as this: the only viable future we are to have is one which business innovates to demand less of our world. And when we do create this space for nature to thrive, it can bring back that stability and that productivity that we rely on. So, why might a business be interested in working toward the universal goals? There are many reasons why this is true, including things like you reduce reputational risks, you can reduce uncertainties or high fluctuations in costs. It's a great way to enhance brand reputation, reduce operational costs, and also foster innovation. Since I manage an employee engagement program, what I wanted to focus on was the opportunity of attracting and retaining employees, which is a big one. And it turns out that, you know, employees are looking more and more for these purpose-driven initiatives and value, and looking to match their values with the companies that they work for when choosing who to work for. So 88% of millennials say their job is more fulfilling when employees provide the opportunity for them to make a positive impact. And when employees do feel engaged, it can lead to things like increased sales, productivity, and profitability, which was identified in a Gallup survey. And also, one of the things that is coming up more and more now is employees are no longer asking nicely for a company to embed purpose into its mission. They're actually starting to demand it. And if these employees are not getting what they want to see, then they have some good tools in their fingertips to make sure the public knows about it. And that can be a huge risk to corporate groups. And so a report that came out, I think last year, said that, you know, workforce activism could cost large corporate groups up to 25% of its revenue per year. So that's it's a huge risk not doing it, but also a huge opportunity of doing it. So we created Living Planet at Work to help employees that care about the environment pursue their passions and grow sustainability within their workplaces. And so what it is, it's an online platform which is free to sign up to. And we have resources to help employees do two kind of main things. One is reduce their office's environmental footprint. And we offer high-level guides to help people learn about things like energy, waste, purchasing, paper, those kinds of categories. And the other thing that we offer is opportunities and ideas to help people engage their employees around supporting WWF's conservation programs or projects through some of the campaigns and events that we're offering. So just a few examples, if you've heard of the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup Program before, or, you know, planting native plants, or our, you know, Earth Hour program, which is a global program that has been running for a long time and quite popular, and some other kind of workplace and team fundraising events as well. And through our online hub, there's a number of different ideas and guides to help you think about how to reduce your office's footprint. And you can access these how-to resources for free, like I mentioned on the website. And we also offer some opportunities for individuals to be featured on the site through our stories page. And we have some digital communications and are always looking at opportunities to create kind of a sharing and learning environment where we're not just learning from employees, and we're not just telling them what to do, but we're also learning from them. And we're also trying to help them learn from each other. So I just wanted to show this quickly to give you a little bit more of a specific sense of the kinds of activities and actions that we offer. And you can see the range of ideas. So things like green team support or virtual film screenings or DIY office sustainability challenges and some WWF campaigns and fundraising activities. So you might be wondering now with COVID-19 and many people actually not going to offices, what does that mean for this program? And you're right, COVID-19 has impacted many of us in our jobs. And it's also making us think differently about Living Planet at Work because of that. So we're kind of thinking about what we're doing to evolve the program into something that makes sense given that changing landscape of COVID-19. And we're using this time as an opportunity to reevaluate our existing programming to see what makes sense for us. So what do we keep? What do we change? What do we get rid of as we move forward? And we're asking ourselves questions like, how do we navigate the COVID-19 landscape? And what can employees do to protect and restore nature? Or, what is it that employees want to see from us? And of course, an important one is how do we move toward sustained change in action? And to help us find out these answers, we're actually looking at pulling together a small working group, which something that you could be a part of. And so if you want to provide, we want people to provide their perspectives on these topics and to kind of make some of our ideas come to life by piloting certain workplace sustainability actions that can help restore and protect nature. But, in the meantime, while that's all kind of percolating, what are some of the things that you can do right now? I did want to encourage you at this time to use it as an opportunity to learn about the things that matter to you. And so, for example, if caring about the environment means a lot to you, now's a great time to kind of sink a little bit deeper into that feeling and learn more about the role you can play as an employee, as a parent, as a citizen, as a part of our planet. And some of these opportunities we offer include gardening with native plants. And so we actually have a video on planting a container garden, which I'm sure we'll be able to send to you later. And we have information on litter and water health through the Great Canadian Shoreline Cleanup, which is an initiative of WWF-Canada and Oceanwise. And so our website will show you how to do a safe household cleanup, but if you're not still don't feel safe going outside and picking up litter, we also have a number of virtual activities, including something like a new household plastic audit, which will be released pretty soon. And you can also learn about and practice sustainability at home. So, what's your carbon footprint? Or have you done a waste audit before? And how might you be able to reduce your household energy use maybe, or maybe lower your impact from purchasing? Or maybe you want to think about your role as an employee, as an events person. contributing to the future where people and nature thrive. And so one of the ways to kind of help set you up for that is learning about the connection between business and nature by watching the film Our Planet, Our Business. You can also visit the Living Planet at Work website and sign up as a champion, which can offer you some good primer information to help you think about that too. And then if you're looking for a fun activity, you can also learn about wildlife with family. And we have a Facebook Live every Wednesday, the last Wednesday of each month, called Wildlife Wednesdays, which is a fun opportunity to learn some neat facts about different species. And you can also sign up to, like I mentioned, to Living Planet at Work. And you can do that by visiting atwork.wwf.ca. And I hope that you find the site valuable. And I'm obviously here to answer any questions that you have as you go through the information. And yeah, I'm really happy and excited that you're all interested in contributing to a more sustainable future. So thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. So, Amy, I have to tell you, this rarely happens to me. I was writing down questions, and as soon as I wrote them down to ask you, you answered them. So, congratulations on being so completely thorough. I learned a ton, and it really added some depth to some issues that I was already a little bit aware of, but I really appreciate how you broke it down and really focused it. I think you're right. People want to work at companies that care about the environment, and people want to buy from companies that care about the environment. At the end of the day, no planet, no business, right?
Exactly.
You know, I especially appreciate what you had to say about freshwater. I live in Niagara. We're sort of surrounded by it. And, you know, I recently found out that we have some local companies that are doing development for future tourism who've been repeatedly sanctioned for environmental issues. And, you know, I'm thinking we need to start making some noise about some of those problems. And wow. So what I'd like to do is I will gather up all of the resources, and you know, I'll connect with you, and we'll make sure that we post them on the platform. And thank you. Thank you for your time and your effort. Obviously, a great deal of effort goes into sort of making sure that your message is sent out. And we're going to take you up on some of those challenges. So thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm super excited that you learned a lot, and I'm always available to support however I can.